Howdy folks, I'm Colonel Sanders and you're not. I made a video like this several times and even recently on TikTok about my family relation to the Colonel and how there are no other Sanders in the family. Now, I can say that with confidence, not for bragging rights or because I want to be the last one, but because I am the last one. There have been countless people, including before I was born, when my grandfather worked in Fairfield. He worked with somebody with the last name of Sanders too. And this guy was bragging about knowing the Colonel and bragging about being related to him, and he wasn't related to him. My grandfather ended up calling him out. He said, "It's funny, I never seen you at any of our family reunions." Even in recent days, I get people with the last name Sanders on my TikTok page constantly saying that they're related, or they're messaging me saying that they are related, and then they show me their family tree, and they A, show me a tree that's inaccurate, or B, refuse to show me a tree. They say, "Oh, I don't have a tree, but we just trust us that we have it." No. Okay? No. See, I know the Sanders line to me. You have Clarence Sanders, who was the Colonel's brother. You have the Colonel, and you have his sister, Catherine. Catherine last name changed to Cummings, and that's where you get Lee Cummings and Violet Lou Cummings, and then those names have branched off to many different ones. You have Bennett, you have Edwards, and there's still some Cummings around today. No Sanders on Catherine's side. They're related, but no last name Sanders. On the Colonel's side, him and Josephine had a son, Harland David Sanders Jr., who died in his 20s from a blood infection. And he died young without children. He only had two surviving daughters, Margaret and Mildred. Margaret married, and her name changed to Adams, and her children were Adams. They're still Adams today. Mildred married someone named Ruggles. Her last name changed to Ruggles. Her children were Ruggles, and there's other last names associated too, but none of them are Sanders. And some people come forward to me on my page, and they say, "I'm a Sanders, I'm the Colonel's grandson." I'm like, "No, you're not. The grandchildren don't have my last name." Or they come to me and they say, "I'm a Sanders, I'm the Colonel's nephew." And I say, "No, you're not. I know all the nephews alive today." Today, nephews, greats, great-greats, and great-great-greats that are alive. Myself, my grandfather, my uncle, and my father. Those four. Then you have my sister and my other sister who are nieces. And you have my aunt who's a niece. And her two children who are two nieces. But there's only 4 males in the Sanders family with the Sanders last name living today. Prior to that, we had Charles Sanders, who was my grandfather's father. Charles was the nephew of the Colonel on the Sanders side. He was Clarence Sanders' son. Clarence had 2 children. He had Charles Sanders and Jim Sanders, or James Sanders. We called him Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim owned a Columbus, Indiana franchise dressed just like the Colonel, and even replaced him in the advertisements for a short time before he was fired. He mouthed off to the brand or to someone in corporation, and they fired him from being the spokesperson of the brand. He then sold his franchise in Columbus, Indiana, and retired. He lived in Seymour, Indiana. Jim didn't have any biological children of his own, and his stepson didn't carry the last name Sanders. And unfortunately, his stepson is dead now. And I don't believe he had any kids. Charles had 1 son and 3 daughters. 1 daughter's alive today, the other 2 are dead, and they have children alive today, but guess what? Their last names aren't Sanders. So when someone comes to me and they say that their last name's Sanders and that they're related to me or the Colonel, as a nephew, niece, or grandchild, they're lying or they've been lied to. I've seen countless family trees online that were made by extended family or people not related at all, just trying to put a tree together, and they're completely inaccurate. Some of them have Violet Lou Cummings as Lee Cummings' mother and the Colonel's sister, and Catherine Sanders' sister. But Violet Lou was Catherine's daughter and Lee's sister. That right there shows me a lot of trees that have Violet Lou as the Colonel's sister are inaccurate. They also don't contain all the family alive today or all the family that was alive. Not everybody around the world knows the entire family. I didn't really want to put my whole family on the internet, but when the position that I am in now and people are trying to come forward for some clout, I don't like rumors, I don't like lies, I don't like people lying, so I set them straight. There are no other Sanders. If there is another Sanders out there, they are from the Colonel's grandfather siblings or the Colonel's father siblings, which all the DNA testing that we have done, and we didn't do it to see if we're related to the Colonel. My aunt loves doing genealogy. She doesn't make a big deal about the relation to the Colonel. She just likes genealogy. And she likes to figure out where she's from, who she's related to. She knows thousands of people on those websites related. Not one of them have the Sanders last name. Now, she says it's possible that there could be one that's unknown, that's not in the systems, and doesn't even know themselves whether they're related. It could be, but from all the DNA testing that we've done, all the information that is available, both the public trees, the ones that we can verify, and the ones that we have privately that are 100% accurate, that we don't want anybody tampering with, do not show any other Sanders. The last distant Sanders cousin of mine that lived was in 1997. This is when he died, was Howard Sanders, who was John Alexander Sanders' son. John Alexander Sanders was Wilbur Sanders' brother, who was the Colonel's uncle on the Sanders side. And when you go way back, because the furthest back on the Sanders side that we could trace is to New Jersey, and our last name changed to Saunders with a U. At some point between the 1700s, somewhere in the 1700s, our last name changed from Saunders to Sanders. I don't know if that was just a name change that was made. I don't know if that was a marriage that changed the name. I don't know. It doesn't show. We don't have any ancestral records for the Sanders before that. So it's possible there's Saunders related to us. There's other people related to us with different last names that we don't know about. It's possible, but they wouldn't know that they're related either. And most of these people that have come forward to me claiming to be related, their biggest story is the Colonel gave us the recipe. It's the biggest crock story I've heard. A lot of people in this family said, there's one person in my family that may have the recipe. I have not seen it with my own eyes, but I could believe them because their father worked with it, supposedly knew it, which I believe he did. He helped mix the recipe alongside with Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim didn't have any kids, and he died. He didn't hand it to anybody. Claudia helped mix the recipe. She didn't hand it out to anybody. We learned that when Joe Leddington leaked his fake recipe. He claimed it was it. It wasn't it. It wasn't the handwriting. It wasn't Claudia's or the Colonel's handwriting, and it had a lot of misspells in it, and it had inaccuracies in it as well. As salt, they listed as one of the 11. But these people who would be distant cousins of mine saying that their last names are Sanders claim that the Colonel gave their family the recipe. Why would Uncle Harley give an extended, distant cousin relative the recipe over his own daughters, over his own nephews, over his own sister? It doesn't make sense to me why he would do that. And so I say he did not do that. Period. He did not hand that recipe throughout the family. If anybody kept it, they went behind his back when they were helping mix it and just saved it. And if we have it today, anybody in the family has it today, you're not going to see them bragging about it. I only reveal what is already public, whether that's a fake recipe or accurate information. I reveal what is public so that we know what we have to work with. That way people could quit making stuff up and we could disprove these fake recipes. But as I'm saying this, there are no other Sanders in the family. Some people do their research. There are some accurate names that I recognize, and when people come to me and they say that they're related with my last name, the only way that I will show any interest in believing them is if they give me names that only I know of. But somebody of DJ Sanders did know a name. He spelt it wrong. It was Jeduthan Sanders, who was the Colonel's grandfather's father. Jeduthan fathered Cyrus. Cyrus fathered Wilbur. Wilbur fathered the Colonel. But he spelled Jeduthan wrong. That was my first when he spelled Jeduthan wrong. Turns out it was fake. He wasn't related. He gave me a couple other names that I didn't recognize. I went to my aunt. She went to the tree. There was no record of it. Jeduthan only had 2 children. He had a son and a daughter. And the daughter's last name changed to Murfin. His son's last name was Sanders, Cyrus Sanders. Cyrus Sanders had many children, several daughters, several sons. Most of his sons didn't have children of their own. The ones that did have children of their own married the name off. And then there's me. Wilbur had a son, Harland Sanders. Harland Sanders had a son who died with no kids. Harland Sanders' brother, who Wilbur Sanders fathered, was Clarence. Clarence had a son. Clarence had two sons. One of his sons successfully had a son. That son had two sons. One of those sons had me. So you see, I know that I'm related. I know I am related. If there's a distant cousin out there, the only way they would know that they are related is if they've done the ancestry DNA testing to confirm that they are related. So if somebody comes forward with that, we will have a match on our records. I would recognize them. Boom, more Sanders. That would be great. I'd love not to be the last Sanders. But I just get so tired of people pretending for clout. I understand people do it. People do it. I don't know why, but they do it. I know they do, and they're always going to do it. But as long as I'm here, I'm going to disprove what I can. And if somebody with my last name comes forward and they are related, well, that's going to be a miracle, and I will welcome them in the family with open arms. But if you're an a-hole about it, or if you're not related and you're insisting that you are, but being an a-hole about it, I'm going to be an a-hole back. My TikTok has been full. I have a playlist called Family History and Confusion. And on that playlist, I repeat this same story over and over and over and over and over again, but it just gets lost. People don't look at the playlist. So I'm putting it on YouTube here just for it to make perfect sense so it could be as clear as possible. There are no other Sanders in the Colonel's family today. If you have any other last name and you say you're related to me, I will believe you because there are so many last names in this family. But if you come forward to me or you're online bragging about being a Sanders and related to the Colonel, I'm going to say something because you're going to either have to show me evidence that you are related to me or you're going to have to stop lying. And that's just how it is. I prefer people not to publicly do it in the comments because that's showing me that they want to get clout. You can send me a message on Instagram. You can send me a message somewhere else. Privately, you could join the Discord and message me in my Discord. And we can discuss it. I helped John Alexander's Sanders family know how they were related to the Colonel. They knew Howard Sanders. They knew they were related, but they didn't know how. They had no DNA testing. They had no ancestral website trees set up. They just knew from Howard the story, and no one ever believed them. I had ancestral trees set up. Howard is in the ancestral trees. His children aren't, but he is. When I talked to his grandchildren, we found photos that matched in my family's and theirs, and we connected the line, and now we have more extended family that we're happy to know. I think that's a wonderful thing. I was hoping that Howard still had Sanders kids, but he didn't. He had daughters, and they married names. Names changed. And there's several stories like that if you go through the full family tree. Now, some people come to me with family trees that don't show me. They don't show Uncle Jim. They don't show other people in the Colonel's nephews because they're not all on those public trees. And they come to me with those and they call me a liar saying I'm not related. And I understand. I call a lot of people a liar because there's a lot of liars out there. People lying about having the recipe. People lying about being related. People lying about really knowing him. People lying on his name to get clout. I don't agree with doing that. If you knew the Colonel, that's a great story. Share it. That's cool. No need to lie and exaggerate about it. So I guess what I'm saying here, I'm just trying to make it as clear as possible. There are no other Sanders in the Colonel's family other than me, my sisters, and my grandfather, and my father and uncle that are living. Especially on the nephew side. Now, again, distant cousin, you got to show me how you're related, and we have to make it make sense because there are millions of Sanders across the world that are not related, but they do have similar names in their family line. Those can get honestly confused on ancestral trees. Someone else could have a Juduthan Sanders in their family line. But because that name is highly associated with Colonel Sanders' family tree, somebody going through their family tree can see that. It will pop up. Maybe they're born the same year. I've seen it. Maybe they're born and died the same year, same area. It just gets confused, and they honestly make a mistake and add them into their tree thinking that they're related, and that becomes a cool bragging right, and you start telling people about it. Then I pop up and I ruin it, and I apologize for that. But if you're lying on his name knowingly for clout, I have no respect for you, and I'm going to call you a liar. But it's just what it is. You know, we have a lot of family. The Colonel has many grandchildren, great-grandchildren. The Catherine has many great-grandchildren, children and grandchildren. Clarence doesn't have a very big family in his direct line related to him. Clarence's side is dwindling away. But the Colonel's line won't end. There's a lot of grandchildren. The relation won't end. There's a lot of Dunleavys, Cleggs, Cathcarts, and you name it. There's a lot. There's a lot of family and extended family out there. The Colonel's bloodline's not going to end at me. The last name might, but it's just what it is. I mean, again, if a distant cousin of mine comes forward and they're truthful about it, praise the Lord. I'll put them in the family tree. I will tell everybody that they are related. If they want to be known, and I will accept that. And then it will change to there are no other Sanders other than me and these guys. But there are a lot of liars out there. The biggest one, if you know somebody with the last name Sanders and they're saying they're related, if they say they have the original recipe, they're lying. That's the biggest turnoff. They're lying if they say they have the original recipe because nobody has it. Again, one family member that's not the last name Sanders, different last name, might have it. They have a very good reason to have a very good story behind it. So I'm inclined to believe them. They're not sharing it. They're not going to post it. They're not going to flail it around. They're not going to brag about it. They're not going to share it with their friends. It's not going to get handed around the family. It's going to stay with them. And that's how it should be. If they have it. But there's a lot of other family, like Joe Lettington. I shouldn't say his family is not related, and he decided to dig his own grave with this family, with his lies. But people like him bragging about having it and lying about it. If he was being truthful about what he was sharing, I would have no problem with people calling him the nephew. But people are calling him the Colonel's own nephew. Some call him the only nephew. That's wrong. And the way that he's been lying and the things that they've said on my page, I don't want him associated with this family. I don't want him associated as the nephew. He might be a step-nephew or a step-great-nephew. He wants to be rude to this family and spread lies. Well, then we're going to treat him what he is. That's all I got to say about that. I hope you learned something.